Hi, I'm Raleigh Brown, and today we're going to do a lesson on what I call the art of noodling. Now, most of the time when we pick up the guitar, we probably are either just wasting time or we are working on something specific, and a lot of times that specific thing might be learning a fiddle tune or maybe working on the chord progression to a jazz standard, or it might be reading a piece of tablature on an old blues arrangement or something like that. And that's great. I think that also it's really important for you, especially if you're somebody who feels that improvisation doesn't come readily to you and that you're only happy when you're reading something off a sheet of music. I think it's really important to find a way to just be with the guitar and experiment and try to come up with some interesting sounds and maybe learn how to hear how different sounds relate to each other. And so in this video, what we're going to try to do is put together an organized approach to do that, so that if you pick up your guitar and you go, well, I'd really like to just mess around right now, but I don't know how to mess around, then hopefully this will give you some tools to help you with that messing around project. Okay? So let me get you in tune here, and in getting you in tune, I also want to define the strings of the guitar. So it's conventional to call this high E the first string, and then the B string is the second, the G string is the third, the D string is the fourth, the A string is the fifth, and the low E string is the sixth. And if you remember those names and numbers for the strings, it'll make it much easier for us to communicate, and I'll be able to say, put your finger on the fourth string, and you won't say, is that the G or the D? Okay? So we are going to get right started here, and let's get to it. So let's see first if we can kind of decide on what noodling is. And I want to start by saying that there can be good noodling and bad noodling in a sense. And I take that quote from, I can't remember whether it was Mike Stern or Steve Vai, in a documentary about the great jazz guitarist Lenny Breau, said, yeah, Lenny was always noodling on the guitar. And but the thing is, when there's good noodling and bad noodling, and Lenny's noodling was always good noodling. So we would like to steer you towards good noodling, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, what that is. But basically, one of the ways of thinking about it is, it's the kind of things that a good musician plays when he's just warming up and sitting around. Ted Green used to talk about how when he first started playing guitar, he'd take a lesson and his teacher would give him a bunch of, buzzing on the B string or whatever he was learning that was very technical. And then he said, like at the end of the lesson, then he'd say, okay, that's all for now, and maybe he'd go, yeah. And Ted Green would think, that's what I want to learn. I don't want to learn buzzing on the B string. So noodling can be, in the hands of a competent musician, it can be about anything that you would play freely and using, maybe not always going to your conscious mind, maybe just doodling on the guitar. But of course, in order for you to doodle on the guitar, you have to have something physically in place. Your hands have to know where to go. So we're going to try and explore that in several different ways today. And one of the big ideas, there's actually two big ideas I want to give you. But let me first play you just a little bit of a noodle here, just with a flat pick, just a melodic thing, where I might just go, So in that little noodle, which is going to be related to the first exercise I give you, the first exercise is going to be noodling with the C major scale. But there were two things going on which I want to kind of define as important issues. And one of them is what I narcissistically call Raleigh's rule. And that's the rule which I mention in many of these videos, that the more you can make your guitar in some way recall the sound of the human voice, the more emotional involvement you're going to promote from your listener. So when I played for you just now, I didn't just go an endless machine gun barrage of notes. I thought it out into little musical sentences, musical phrases. And just as I'm talking to you now, there's not a whole lot of dead space here, but there are still, it's still divided into phrases. So instead of going, you might go, and you have a little sentence and a little tiny break and another little sentence. There's also the idea in there of dynamics, of emphasizing certain notes. And all of that is how you make music come to life, and is the difference between learning a scale, which is memorizing the collection of notes you're going to play, and then turning those notes into music. The thing about noodling is that's kind of your little test tube in which you can immediately take a scale and try to turn it into music. The second thing I want to mention is that humans have a great skill for what I call pattern recognition, so that if what you play is just a constant stream of notes that are sort of unrelated to each other than being part of the same scale, it's not going to create as much of an interest on the part of the listener as it will if you play patterns of some kind, and we'll talk about various kinds. But when I played the little vamp before, I put in a part that went so I established this pattern and then repeated it slightly different, and then again. And of course, you don't want to have the same pattern repeat again and again, but you do want to have some sense of that pattern. And then part of the thing of making it interesting is keeping the audience guessing. And in musical terms, we call that tension and resolution. And when we create tension, the listener wants it to come back home again. So if I'm playing in C and I go, the listener subconsciously is going, okay, come on, get back to. And so we play with that. And one of the ways of creating tension is by repeating something. So if you repeat something, if I just took one pattern and went, then eventually the listener, the more times you repeat it, the more times the listener will be going, okay, already, where are you going with this? So that you might repeat it 2 or 3 times. And then resolve it to something. So I want to, right at the beginning, plant these 2 big ideas with you. Idea number 1 is making sure that you try to make the music sound human in some way. And idea number 2 is thinking in terms of patterns, because humans recognize patterns. And you could also call that playing thematically or using motifs. And that's actually a pretty common terminology that gets used in terms of musical composition. Okay, so I'm going to play you a noodle based on the C major scale, and part of it, you'll get a written PDF of it, and it's going to be partially just about the C major scale, and we'll write out the scale, and it'll also be about how you move up the neck with that scale, and maybe move back down again. Okay, so here we go.